Don't be gentle, prove humans are strong. Alien warriors challenge. Cold, that was the first thing. Cold metal under his back seeping through the thin fabric covering him. Then the low, rhythmic hum vibrating up his spine. Jake's eyes snapped open. Dim, indirect light illuminated smooth, dark walls curving up into shadow. Where the hell? A silhouette detached itself from the deeper darkness near the wall, tall, impossibly still. Okay, not dreaming. The figure moved closer, silent steps on the metallic floor. It stopped beside the slab he was lying on. A dark, form-fitting suit covered it entirely, seamless and non-reflective. The head was obscured by a smooth, opaque faceplate that caught no light, offered no reflection. Utterly blank. Subject designation, Jake Riley. Status, conscious. The voice was feminine but filtered, strangely flat and devoid of inflection, like a machine reading a script. Subject designation, charming. He tried to sit up, muscles protesting, head swimming. A wave of dizziness hit him hard. Remain supine, the voice commanded. Not loud, but absolute. A cool pressure landed on his shoulder, firm and unyielding, pushing him back down. The touch was brief, clinical, but startlingly strong. It sent a jolt through him that had nothing to do with the cold. Your recovery is proceeding within expected parameters, the figure stated. Jake swallowed, throat dry. Recovery from what? Where am I? His own voice sounded rusty. Post-cryogenic stasis reanimation. Location, Habitation Unit 7, Starship Vindicator. Vindicator? The name meant nothing. Cryostasis, he remembered. Blinding light, alarms, shouting, then cold, deep, endless cold. Nothing after that until waking up here. Who are you? He managed, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Trying and failing. Designation, Xyler, assigned guardian. Guardian sounds more like warden. He shifted slightly, testing his limbs. Sore, weak, but functional. The figure Xyler watched him motionless. He could feel the scrutiny, even through the blank faceplate. It was unnerving, like being observed by a security camera that could reach out and touch you. Why am I here? Your vessel experienced catastrophic failure. Rescue protocols were initiated. My vessel, the Ares V, fragments started coming back. The cargo run, the asteroid field they weren't supposed to be near. The impact. Affirmative. The exploration vessel Ares V, your crewmates did not survive. The words hit him like physical blows. Didn't survive. Sarah, Miller, Cap, gone just like that. A cold knot formed in his stomach, worse than the chill from the metal slab. He stared up at the shadowed ceiling, the hum of the ship suddenly seeming louder, more oppressive. Xyler tilted her head slightly, a subtle shift of the blank faceplate. Physiological indicators denote distress. Increased heart rate, shallow respiration. Acknowledged. Acknowledged, that's it. He pushed himself up again, ignoring the dizziness. This time she didn't stop him. He swung his legs over the side of the slab, feet hitting the cold floor. The room spun for a second. Guardian, huh? So you guard me. Sarcasm felt like the only shield he had left. My function is to ensure your survival and integration. Integration into what? He looked around the small, sterile room. Featureless walls, the slab he'd woken on, a sealed door. Minimalist chic, alien prison edition. Integration into the collective operational structure, pending assessment. Collective assessment, great, more paperwork. Look, Xyler, he said, testing the name. It felt foreign, awkward. I appreciate the rescue, sort of, assuming this isn't some kind of advanced interrogation. He rubbed his temples. But I just want to go home. Earth is currently inaccessible. Your return is not feasible. Not feasible? What does that mean? Panic started clawing at the edges of his control. Communication range exceeded, propulsion limitations, temporal distortion factors. She listed the points with the same flat tone. Temporal distortion. That sounded bad, really bad. How long was I in stasis? He asked, dread pooling in his gut. Standard calculation indicates approximately 107 Terran solar cycles. 107 years. The number hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Everything he knew, everyone he cared about beyond the Ares V crew, gone, dust, history. The cold in the room wasn't just the metal anymore. It was inside him. He felt hollowed out. Just breathe, panic later. He needed information, survival first. Okay, he said, forcing the word out. Okay, so integration, assessment. What does that involve? Zyler stepped back, creating a sliver more space between them. Evaluation of physiological and psychological compatibility, assessment of useful skills, determination of societal role. Societal role, like janitor or professional subject designation, Jake Riley. Her head tilted again, that slight, unreadable movement. Your tendency towards non-literal communication is noted. It complicates assessment. Good, glad I could help. He stood up fully, testing his balance, still shaky but upright. He needed to move, to do something other than absorb body blows of information. Can I get some clothes? Something other than this. Sheet. He gestured at the thin covering he wore. Appropriate attire will be provided post-hygiene cycle. She gestured towards the sealed door. Proceed. He eyed the door, then her. Tall, imposing, radiating a quiet confidence that bordered on menace. Going anywhere with her felt like walking into a trap, but staying here wasn't an option either. Lead the way, Guardian, he muttered, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. Zyler turned smoothly and the door slid open, revealing a corridor bathed in the same dim, indirect light. The air here felt different, still cool but with a faint, unidentifiable scent, something metallic and organic at the same time. He followed her out, the door sliding shut behind him. The corridor stretched ahead, curving gently out of sight, featureless like the room. 107 years. The thought echoed in the sudden silence. Great, just great. He needed to focus, survive this, figure out what integration really meant, and figure out the silent, blank-faced alien walking ahead of him. Step 1, don't piss off the Guardian. Probably step 2 as well. They walked in silence for a minute. The low hum of the ship was constant. His bare feet made soft padding sounds on the floor. Her steps were completely silent. So, he tried again, needing to break the oppressive quiet. The collective, what's that? Your government, species. The Cathar collective encompasses multiple systems and assimilated species, she replied without turning. Unified purpose, optimal function. Assimilated sounds vaguely Borg-like, not comforting. And you're Cathar. Designation accurate. They reached another door. It slid open into a room marginally larger than the first. Gleaming white surfaces. No visible controls, just smooth panels. It looked like a futuristic bathroom designed by someone who hated clutter. Hygiene cycle, Zyler stated, gesturing towards a recessed area that presumably contained a shower or sonic cleanser or whatever aliens used. Standard procedure dictates removal of contaminants post-stasis. Right, contaminants. He looked at the hygiene area, then back at her standing near the entrance. You gonna watch. Observation is standard during initial integration phases, to ensure procedural compliance and monitor physiological response. Of course, because privacy is also optional, he sighed inwardly. Arguing seemed pointless and potentially hazardous. He was weak, disoriented, and completely out of his depth. She was not. He walked towards the hygiene alcove. There were no visible taps or nozzles, just smooth walls. As he stepped in, a faint shimmering field activated behind him, sealing the space. Mist, slightly warm, began to hiss from invisible emitters in the walls. It carried the same faint, metallic organic scent as the corridor. Okay, sonic shower it is. Or maybe just alien steam clean. He stripped off the thin covering, feeling exposed and vulnerable even with the shimmering field supposedly offering privacy. The mist intensified, swirling around him. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was strange. Automated. Impersonal, like everything else so far. He quickly cleaned himself, the process efficient and slightly bewildering. When the mist subsided, a panel slid open nearby, revealing neatly folded clothes. A simple dark gray tunic and trousers made of a soft, slightly elastic material, better than the sheet. He dressed quickly. The clothes fit surprisingly well. Guess they took measurements in cryo. Thorough. He stepped out of the alcove. Xyler hadn't moved. Her blank faceplate seemed to track his emergence. Physiological reading stable, she announced. Proceed to nutritional intake facility. Breakfast time, lead on. He felt marginally better after the cleaning, slightly more human, still dreading whatever came next. She turned and led him back into the corridor, heading in a different direction. The ship, Vindicator, felt vast and empty. He hadn't seen anyone else, just long, curving corridors and sealed doors. The silence was broken only by the hum and their footsteps, well, his footsteps. He glanced sideways at Xyler. Her posture was perfect, economical movements. No wasted energy. She carried herself with an air of coiled readiness. Despite the blank faceplate and flat voice, there was an intensity about her presence. They entered a wider chamber. Several low tables and benches were arranged in the space, dimly lit like everywhere else. No windows. Another figure, dressed in a similar dark suit but slightly bulkier, stood near a wall panel on the far side. It turned its blank faceplate towards them as they entered, then turned back to the panel. So, not entirely alone, just mostly. Xyler gestured towards one of the tables. Sit. Sustenance will be provided. He sat on the hard bench. It wasn't comfortable. Nothing here seemed designed for comfort. Function over form taken to an extreme. Wonder what alien breakfast tastes like. Probably gray paste. A section of the table in front of him lit up. A panel slid open, and a tray emerged. On it was a covered bowl and a bulbous container with a short spout. He eyed it suspiciously. What is it? Nutrient paste formulation 7B optimized for human physiology post-stasis. Xyler remained standing near the table. And rehydration solution. Called it gray paste. He cautiously lifted the lid. It was indeed a thick grayish paste. It smelled faintly of yeast and something vaguely fruity. Appetizing wasn't the word. You guys eat this too? He asked, poking it with the provided utensil, a single, paddle-shaped implement. Cathar nutrient requirements differ. Our intake is processed separately. He scooped up a small amount of the paste. Here goes nothing. He brought it to his mouth. The texture was smooth, almost unnervingly so. The taste was bland, not bad, not good, just vaguely sweet and savory at the same time, utterly neutral, like eating edible beige. Delicious, he muttered drily, taking another bite. He needed the energy. Xyler tilted her head. The term delicious typically indicates significant positive sensory input. Your vocal tone and facial microexpressions do not correlate. Observant, force of habit, he said around a mouthful of paste. Human coping mechanism, sarcasm. Sarcasm, she repeated, the word sounding odd in her flat voice. Intentional communication of meaning opposite to literal interpretation, logically inefficient, increases potential for misunderstanding. Yeah, well, sometimes logic doesn't quite cover it. He focused on eating the paste. It wasn't filling, but it seemed to settle his stomach. He picked up the hydration bulb. It felt cool and slightly yielding. He drank. Water or something very close to it, clean, tasteless. He finished the paste quickly, driven by hunger and a desire to get this part over with. The empty bowl retracted back into the table. Nutritional intake complete, Xyler stated. Proceed to orientation module delta. More modules, more walking. He stood up. The other alien figure had disappeared from the room, still just him and his guardian. As they walked through another series of identical corridors, Jake's anxiety started to climb again. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by annoying uncertainty. Lost in time, lost in space, under the care of a logical, unnerving alien. This assessment, he started, needing to fill the silence again. What happens if I fail? Failure is not an optimal outcome. No kidding, but what happens? Individuals deemed non-compatible or non-functional are assigned to reclamation. Reclamation, that sounds ominous. And what does reclamation involve? Resource optimization, biological matter recycling. He stopped walking, biological matter recycling. She meant exactly what it sounded like. His blood ran cold. They recycle people who don't fit in. Zyler stopped a few paces ahead and turned back, her faceplate fixed on him. Your physiological state indicates heightened stress. Heart rate 84 beats per minute. Respiration elevated. Yeah, well, hearing about biological matter recycling tends to do that to a guy. His voice was tight. The defensive humor felt thin now, inadequate. It is a statement of fact. Inefficient elements compromise collective stability. Right, efficiency. He forced himself to start walking again, catching up to her. His mind raced. He had to pass this assessment, whatever it took. Failure wasn't an option, literally. They arrived at another door. Orientation Module Delta. It slid open to reveal a room dominated by a large, dark screen covering one wall. 2 chairs faced it. They looked marginally more comfortable than the benches in the mess hall. Small victories. Sit, Zyler instructed, gesturing to one of the chairs. She remained standing near the door. He sat. The chair conformed slightly to his shape. The screen flickered to life, displaying complex geometric patterns that shifted and reformed. Hypnotic, disorienting. Orientation program alpha commencing, Zyler announced. Visual and auditory stimuli designed to calibrate cognitive processing and establish baseline understanding of collective principles. Images began flashing on the screen. Alien landscapes, strange architecture, diagrams of star systems he didn't recognize. Symbols and equations overlaid them. A low, resonant sound filled the room, modulating in pitch and rhythm. It wasn't music, not exactly. More like structured noise. It was overwhelming. Too much information, too fast, too alien. His head started to throb. He tried to focus, to make sense of it, but it was like trying to drink from a fire hose. Just absorb what you can, stay functional. He didn't know how long he sat there, bombarded by sights and sounds. Time seemed to lose meaning. He felt detached, observing the stream of data without truly processing it. Suddenly the screen went dark. The sound cut off, leaving a ringing silence. He blinked, trying to clear his head. Initial calibration complete, Zyler said. She walked towards him. Physiological response within acceptable deviation. She stopped directly in front of his chair, looking down at him. Close, too close. Her presence felt heavy, dominating. He could feel the faint coolness radiating from her suit. He instinctively leaned back, pressing himself into the chair. Personal space, still not a thing. She reached out. He flinched before he could stop himself. Her hand stopped inches from his face. Neurological activity indicates overload, she stated. Her voice was still flat, but maybe a fraction less robotic. Or was he imagining it? Minor synaptic recalibration required. Before he could ask what that meant, her fingers, cool and firm, pressed against his temples. Not hard, but insistent. He froze. Her touch was precise, impersonal, diagnostic, but it was still a touch, intimate in its clinical invasion of his space. A faint tingling sensation spread from the points of contact, not painful but strange, like static electricity under his skin. His headache seemed to recede slightly. The feeling of being overwhelmed lessened, replaced by a weird clarity. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Optimizing neural pathways, reducing cognitive dissonance caused by informational influx." She kept her fingers pressed against his temples. He could feel the slight texture of her glove material, smooth, but with a subtle grain. He forced himself to stay still, breathing slowly, trapped in the chair under her touch. It felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds. Then she withdrew her hand. "Recalibration complete," she announced, stepping back. "Proceed to skill assessment." He took a shaky breath, the lingering tingle fading from his temples. The clarity remained. The world seemed sharper, less fuzzy around the edges. Whatever she did, it worked. "Still don't like it." "Skill assessment," he echoed, pushing himself out of the chair. "What kind of skills are we talking about? I was a cargo pilot mostly." "Assessment includes cognitive aptitude, problem-solving capacity, physical dexterity, and stress response management." "Stress response management, after threatening me with recycling, seems fair." They left the orientation module, heading deeper into the ship. The corridors began to change subtly. More visible conduits along the walls, occasional panels with glowing symbols he couldn't read. The hum of the ship seemed louder here, more industrial. They entered a large, cavernous space. Training mats covered the floor. Various pieces of equipment he didn't recognize were scattered around. Complex frameworks, consoles with flashing lights, suspended metallic objects. "Physical assessment commences," Xyler declared. She gestured towards the center of the room. "Assume ready stance." "Ready stance," he looked at the empty mat. "For what? Are we sparring?" The idea was ludicrous. She was easily taller than him and he'd felt her strength. "Assessment requires evaluation of reaction time, balance, and applied force," she replied. She moved onto the mat opposite him, adopting a posture that looked simultaneously relaxed and ready to strike. Balanced, low center of gravity. "Oh, we're sparring." This was not going to end well. He hesitantly stepped onto the mat, trying to remember basic self-defense stances from mandatory corporate training years ago. Felt ridiculous. Objective: maintain position on the mat. Avoid displacement. Engage defensively. Defensively, right, try not to get pulverized. He braced himself. Xyler moved, fast, incredibly fast. Not a strike but a swift, controlled push aimed at his center mass. He barely had time to react, shifting his weight, absorbing the impact with his forearms. It jarred him back a step, but he stayed on the mat. Her strength was startling. Solid, like hitting a metal strut. Reaction time, adequate. Balance compensation, marginal, she stated calmly, resetting her position. Marginal felt pretty good to me. He took a deeper breath, focusing. She came again. This time a low sweep aimed at his legs. He jumped back, barely avoiding it. Landed awkwardly, stumbling slightly. Evasion successful, stability compromised. This continued for several minutes. Her movements were precise, efficient, testing his reflexes, his balance, his ability to anticipate. She never struck hard enough to injure, but every block, every parry sent jolts through his arms. It was exhausting. He was sweating, breathing hard. She seemed completely unaffected, her breathing inaudible, her posture unwavering. She's just testing, like running diagnostics on a machine, but the machine was him. He misjudged a feint. She sidestepped his clumsy block and used his momentum against him, hooking a leg behind his ankle while pushing his shoulder. He went down, hitting the mat with a grunt. Not hard, it was padded, but definitely down. He lay there for a second, catching his breath. Humiliating. Xyler stood over him, faceplate impassive. Displacement achieved. Assessment sequence paused. Resume ready stance. He pushed himself up slowly, muscles aching. Resume. Oh joy. He got back into his stance, legs feeling shaky. "Your physical conditioning is below Cathar standard," she observed. "However, tenacity is noted." Tenacity, nice word for too stubborn to stay down. She moved again. He reacted instinctively, ducking under a high push and trying to circle around her. A bad move. She pivoted smoothly, her arm catching him across the chest, halting his movement instantly. He was pinned against her side for a moment, trapped by the unyielding pressure of her arm, close enough to feel the strange coolness of her suit through his tunic again, close enough to hear a faint whirring sound, maybe internal mechanics. The contact was jarring, intimate in its forcefulness. He pushed away instinctively. She released him immediately, stepping back. Spatial awareness requires improvement. Proceed to dexterity assessment. He rubbed his chest, catching his breath. Every interaction with her felt like a collision, physical or verbal, left him feeling off balance, exposed. The dexterity assessment involved manipulating complex geometric shapes on a console, assembling intricate mechanical puzzles against a timer. His hands felt clumsy, thick-fingered compared to the delicate tasks. The earlier neural recalibration seemed to help. He could focus better than he expected, but the pressure was immense. Xyler stood nearby, observing silently. He could feel her gaze, even if he couldn't see her eyes. Just keep going, don't screw up. He completed the tasks, just barely within the allotted time for the final puzzle. His hands were cramping. Dexterity within acceptable parameters, Xyler announced. Cognitive assessment follows. More tests. Logic puzzles displayed on a screen, pattern recognition, memory challenges, faster and faster, more complex. It felt like the orientation module again, but targeted, demanding active participation. His brain felt like it was running a marathon. Finally, it ended. The screen went blank. He slumped back in the assessment chair, exhausted mentally and physically. Preliminary assessment complete, Xyler stated. Data compilation and analysis underway. She turned and walked towards the exit. Return to Habitation Unit 7. He followed her silently back through the corridors. His mind was numb. He'd survived the tests, apparently within acceptable parameters, but the threat of reclamation still hung over him, and the memory of her touch, her strength, the unnerving closeness during the physical assessment, it lingered. Back in his small, sterile room, the door slid shut, leaving him alone for the first time since waking up. He sank onto the edge of the slab, burying his head in his hands. 107 years. Everyone gone. Trapped on an alien ship with beings who recycled inefficient elements. And his guardian was a tall, blank-faced alien warrior who seemed to analyze his every breath. This is my life now. The thought was bleak. He pushed it away. Survival. That was the only thing that mattered. Pass the assessments, figure out the rules, find a way to be useful, avoid reclamation. He lay back on the cold slab, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the ship seemed to mock him. Sleep felt impossible, but exhaustion eventually claimed him, pulling him into a restless, dreamless dark. Days blurred into a routine dictated by Xyler's schedules. Nutritional intake, still gray-paced. Physical conditioning, getting marginally less marginal. Language tutorials. Cathar was complex, guttural, logical to a fault, more cognitive exercises. Xyler was a constant presence. Observing, instructing, occasionally recalibrating him with that unnerving touch to his temples when the information load became too much. He learned more about the Cathar, piecing things together from the tightly controlled orientation materials and Xyler's blunt, literal answers to his questions. They valued efficiency, logic, the collective good above all else. Emotion was viewed as a disruptive anomaly. Individuality was tolerated only as long as it served the whole. Assimilated species were integrated based on their utility. He saw other Cathar occasionally in the corridors or communal areas, always encased in the dark suits and blank faceplates. They moved with the same silent efficiency as Xyler. He sometimes saw other non-Cathar beings too, clearly other assimilated species, working at various tasks. They kept to themselves, faces often showing a kind of weary resignation he was starting to recognize in himself. No one made eye contact. No one spoke unless necessary. His interactions with Xyler remained tense, transactional. He learned to anticipate her literal interpretations, curbing his sarcasm mostly. Sometimes it slipped out, a defense mechanism he couldn't fully suppress. Physical output increased by 7.3%. She noted after a particularly grueling conditioning session, where he'd managed to stay on the mat slightly longer than usual. "Whoopee," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. She tilted her head. Define whoopee. Auditory expression non-standard. Context suggests mild positive affirmation, incongruent with physiological indicators of exertion. "Never mind. It means acknowledged," he said wearily. Her silence felt like analysis. She filed away the data point. Move on. The physical contact, though infrequent, remained jarring. During one session, she was demonstrating a complex joint lock, purely for his understanding, she insisted. Her grip on his arm was precise, controlled, but the pressure was immense. He could feel the underlying power, barely restrained. It sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with fear, or maybe not just fear. Another time, navigating a section of the ship undergoing maintenance, conduits sparking, grav plates flickering intermittently, he stumbled as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Zyler's hand shot out, clamping onto his upper arm to steady him. The contact was hard, brief, functional. But in that moment of instability, leaning slightly against her solid form, the universe seemed to narrow down to that single point of contact. Cool suit, unyielding strength. "Maintain footing," she ordered, releasing him as the gravity stabilized. "Environmental instability requires heightened vigilance." "Thanks, Captain Obvious," but the residual imprint of her grip lingered on his skin. He started noticing small things about her. The way her head tilted when processing unexpected data, like his sarcasm. The almost imperceptible pause before she responded to a question outside standard parameters. Tiny cracks in the impassive facade. Or was he just projecting, desperate to see something human in the inhuman? One cycle they didn't use days during language study, the module presented a Cathar historical text. It described a conflict, a necessary assimilation of another species. The language was sterile, focusing on strategy, resource allocation, casualty statistics, efficient cleansing of resistance. Chilling. "They fought back," Jake observed quietly, looking at the casualty numbers for the assimilated species. "High, very high." "Resistance against collective integration is illogical," Zyler stated. "It inevitably leads to suboptimal outcomes." "Suboptimal outcomes," he repeated bitterly. "You mean getting wiped out?" Continuation of feudal conflict maximizes resource expenditure and life unit loss on both sides. Swift resolution minimizes overall detriment. Easy for the winners to say. She turned her faceplate fully towards him. The collective does not win. It optimizes. It integrates. Survival is contingent upon adaptation. There was something in her tone, still flat but heavier. Or was it the topic? The sterile description of mass death felt obscene. He looked away from the screen, feeling sick. "Is that what happened to humans?" he asked, the question hanging in the air. "Did we resist becoming optimized?" He thought of the Ares V, the sudden failure. Was it an accident or something else? "Data regarding initial human collective interactions is classified above your current clearance level." Convenient. So I just get the integrate or be recycled speech. The parameters are clear. Functionality ensures continuation. "Right," he stood up abruptly. "I think I've had enough optimization for one cycle." Zyler observed him for a moment. "Scheduled learning period is not concluded." "Yeah, well, my cognitive processing is hitting a wall. Need a break." He needed space. Away from her, away from the sterile Cathar logic that justified extinction. She considered this. Physiological indicators support claim of cognitive fatigue, deviation from schedule permissible, return to habitation unit. He practically fled the room. Back in his unit, he paced the small space like a caged animal. Integration, assimilation, reclamation. It all sounded like variations on oblivion. and Xyler, his guardian, was the face of it even if she didn't have a face. But she'd let him leave the session early, acknowledged fatigue, a tiny deviation from protocol. Was that significant, or just efficient management of a stressed asset? Stop trying to read things into it. The next cycle, during physical conditioning, the intensity seemed higher. Xyler pushed him harder, her movements faster, more demanding. He was forced to react purely on instinct, no time for thought. Block, dodge, parry, scramble to keep his balance. He managed to anticipate a sweep, using the momentum to spin inside her reach, aiming a clumsy shove at her shoulder, more to create space than inflict damage. It was a mistake. She reacted instantly, not with force but with startling fluidity. Her hand clamped around his wrist, twisting slightly, not painfully but with absolute control. Simultaneously, she shifted her weight, tripping him off balance. He stumbled forward, right into her. His chest hit her torso, harder angles than he expected under the suit. His face ended up inches from her blank faceplate. He could feel the faint vibration of the ship through her body, the persistent coolness of her suit. His heart hammered against his ribs, trapped again, completely overpowered. "Unwise maneuver," she stated, her voice unnervingly close. Filtered, but he could almost imagine the breath behind the words. Aggression without tactical advantage results in vulnerability. He was breathing hard, adrenaline surging. Pinned there, wrist held fast, body pressed against hers. It was the closest they'd been, the most physical contact, and it was entirely about control. Her control. "Get a grip, Riley." He tried to pull his wrist free. Her grip tightened fractionally, effortlessly pinning him. "Release," he bit out, adding the tremor in his voice. She held him for another second, studying him. He could feel the intensity of her unseen gaze. Then, she released his wrist and stepped back smoothly, creating space between them. "Assessment concluded for this cycle," she announced, as if nothing had happened. "Increased aggression noted. Potential indicator of stress adaptation or maladaptation. Further monitoring required." He rubbed his wrist, flexing his fingers. No pain, just the lingering feeling of her grip. Maladaptation. Was that the next step before reclamation? "Yeah, well," he retorted, still breathing heavily. "Maybe being treated like a lab rat makes people a little aggressive." "Your analogy is imprecise. Laboratory rats are utilized for experimental research. You are undergoing integration assessment." "Same difference." He turned away, heading towards the edge of the mat, needing distance. The encounter had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. The physical dominance was expected. The brief, forced intimacy of the collision, that was something else. Unsettling. Weeks turned into months, marked only by the Cathar cycles. Jake fell into a grudging rhythm. He learned the language passively, improved his physical scores, navigated the cognitive tests with grim determination. He learned to live with the constant surveillance, the lack of privacy, the underlying threat. He learned to function. His relationship with Xyler remained complex. She was still his logical, unnerving guardian, but the interactions had subtly shifted. The physical assessments felt less like tests and more like sparring, albeit incredibly one-sided. She still corrected his Cathar grammar with blunt precision, but sometimes, very rarely, there was a flicker of something else in her responses. Once, struggling with a particularly complex piece of Cathar philosophy about the insignificance of the individual self, he'd muttered, "Easy to say when you're part of a giant, galaxy-spanning collective. Try being the last guy from your ship." There was a distinct pause, longer than usual. "Loss of one's initial social unit is a significant variable," she eventually replied. Her tone was unchanged, yet the acknowledgement felt different, less dismissive than usual. Did she just show empathy? Nah, must be tired. The touches remained clinical, functional, applying a medical sensor after a fall during training, adjusting a strap on some assessment equipment. guiding him through a damaged corridor when a power surge knocked out the lights, her hand firm on his back. Each touch sent a jolt through him, a reminder of her alienness, her strength, and the strange, unwelcome tension that always simmered between them. He found himself watching her more closely, the efficiency of her movements, the stillness of her posture when observing him. The way the blank faceplate seemed to amplify the silence, making him hyper-aware of her presence. He wondered what was behind it. What did Cathar look like? Did they have expressions, emotions they simply suppressed? One cycle, an alarm blared through the ship. Harsh, grating. Red emergency lights pulsed in the corridor outside his unit. Before he could react, his door slid open and Xyler was there. Emergency alert. Sector Gamma experiencing atmospheric breach. Evacuation protocols initiated. Her voice was sharp, faster than usual. Urgent. Atmospheric breach, that's bad. Gamma, isn't that where the main power conduits run? Affirmative, potential for cascading system failure. Follow me. Maintain proximity. She turned and moved swiftly down the corridor. He scrambled after her. The ship felt different. The steady hum was replaced by the jarring alarm and the thudding impacts of emergency bulkheads sealing off sections. Figures, Cathar and other species, hurried past them, silent, focused. They navigated a maze of corridors, Xyler moving with unerring certainty. The air grew colder, thinner. He could feel the pressure dropping. Pressure stabilizing systems failing in this sector, Xyler reported, her pace increasing. Auxiliary life support engaging, but capacity limited. They rounded a corner and stopped short. A heavy bulkhead door designed to seal this section was jammed halfway closed. Sparks showered from the mechanism above it. On the other side, he could see the corridor buckling, frost creeping along the walls. The primary evacuation route is blocked, Xyler stated. She examined the door mechanism. Manual override damaged. Is there another way? Jake asked, anxiety tightening his chest. The air was definitely getting thin. He felt lightheaded. Alternative routes compromised by structural collapse. We must force the door. She placed her hands on the heavy metal edge. Your assistance is required. Apply maximum force. He moved beside her, planting his feet, gripping the cold, thick metal. Together, they pushed. The door groaned, metal screeching against metal, but didn't budge. Insufficient force, Xyler said, her voice tight, strained. Was that actual strain? Recalibrating approach. She shifted her position, bracing herself more effectively. Again, apply force on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. They heaved together. He put every ounce of strength he had into it, muscles screaming in protest. Beside him, he could feel the incredible power Xyler exerted. The metal groaned louder, scraped, and then, agonizingly slowly, began to move, inch by agonizing inch. The gap widened just enough to squeeze through. Go, Xyler ordered, quickly. He scrambled through the narrow opening, scraping his shoulder. He turned back, expecting her to follow immediately. But she was still braced against the door, holding it open against the immense pressure differential that was clearly trying to slam it shut. Frost was now coating her suit where it touched the door. Move, she yelled, the filter failing to completely mask the urgency, the raw command. It was the most emotion he'd ever heard from her. Come on, he urged, reaching back towards her. Door integrity failing, seal compromised, go. Suddenly, with a deafening shriek of tortured metal, the mechanism above the door gave way completely. The bulkhead began to slide shut rapidly, driven by the pressure. Xyler shoved herself backward, away from the crushing edge, stumbling slightly as she cleared the gap just before it slammed shut with a final, echoing boom. The force of her backward movement sent her colliding directly into him. He staggered back, catching her weight. Her momentum carried them both off balance. He tripped over a piece of debris, falling backward. Xyler landed heavily on top of him. The impact knocked the wind out of him. For a second, all he knew was pressure, cold, and the sudden, shocking proximity of the alien warrior pinning him to the floor. Her blank faceplate was inches from his, filling his vision. He could hear her breathing, slightly ragged, through the suit's external vents, a definite anomaly. The emergency lights cast flickering red shadows over her smooth helmet. The alarm still blared. The air here was thin, cold, tasting metallic. Survival instincts screamed at him, but overriding everything was the stunning, terrifying intimacy of the moment. Pinned beneath her weight, her solid form pressing him down, her faceplate so close he could see faint scratches on its surface he'd never noticed before. The filtered sound of her breathing. It was too much. Proximity, danger, adrenaline, the accumulated tension of months, it all crashed together. His defenses crumbled. The sarcasm, the detachment, the grim focus on survival, all gone, leaving only raw, overwhelming something. Fear, yes, but also a strange, magnetic pull towards the enigma inches from his face. He didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was the stress, the lack of oxygen making them both lightheaded. Maybe it was an involuntary reaction to the collision, the proximity. Maybe it was something else entirely, something illogical and inefficient. His hand came up not to push her away but to touch the side of her faceplate. Cold, smooth, unresponsive, yet beneath it. Her head tilted fractionally, a subtle shift, and then impossibly she lowered her head further. The blank faceplate pressed against his cheek. Not a kiss, not an attack, not clinical, just contact. Cold, hard surface against his skin. A bizarre gesture of what? Diagnosis, comfort, possession. He felt the faint vibration from her suit, heard the soft whirring sounds up close. Her breathing hitched again, a tiny, sharp intake of air. Anomaly, she murmured, the word vibrating against his skin. Her voice was different, less filtered, rougher, closer. She didn't pull away immediately. Remained there, faceplate pressed against his cheek, pinning him beneath her. The alarms wailed. The red lights pulsed. The universe narrowed to this single point of contact, this inexplicable moment of forced, alien intimacy born from chaos. His heart hammered against her weight. He couldn't breathe properly, trapped, overwhelmed, and utterly, terrifyingly connected. What is happening? The thought was distant, lost in the sensory overload. Slowly, as if processing conflicting directives, Zyler pushed herself up, breaking the contact. The sudden absence of pressure was as jarring as the contact itself. She rose fluidly to her feet, offering him a hand. He stared at her gloved hand for a beat, his mind reeling. Then numbly he took it. Her grip was strong, pulling him easily to his feet. He felt shaky, disoriented. Structural integrity compromised, she stated, her voice reverting slightly towards its usual flatness but not quite reaching it. There was a subtle roughness still there. We must reach the designated safe zone. She released his hand abruptly. She turned and started moving again, navigating the debris-strewn, dimly lit corridor. He followed, his thoughts chaotic. The emergency was still ongoing. Survival was still paramount, but everything felt different now. That moment on the floor, the pressure, the faceplate against his skin, it had changed something, broken something, or maybe created something. He glanced at her back as she moved ahead. The same efficient, controlled movements, the same blank faceplate, but he knew now that there were cracks, subtle fissures in the perfect, logical facade. And he knew with a sinking feeling of certainty that he was in far deeper trouble than just needing to pass an assessment. The danger wasn't just reclamation anymore. It was her. They reached the designated safe zone, a reinforced compartment crowded with other Cathar and a few assimilated individuals. The main doors sealed behind them. Emergency oxygen hissed into the compartment, raising the pressure. The immediate danger seemed to have passed. Zyler stood near the bulkhead, running diagnostics via a small panel projected from her wrist gauntlet. She seemed composed, focused, back to guardian mode. But Jake couldn't shake the image of her faceplate pressed against his cheek, the sound of her ragged breath. He found a spot against the far wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, knees pulled up to his chest. He needed to process, but his thoughts were still scrambled. He felt exposed, raw. The carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself, the sarcasm, the pragmatic focus, felt flimsy, inadequate. He watched Xyler across the crowded compartment. She finished her diagnostics and turned, her blank faceplate scanning the room before settling on him. She held his gaze for a long moment, or at least, he assumed she was looking at him. With the faceplate, it was impossible to be sure, but he felt the focus of her attention like a physical weight. What now? After what felt like an eternity but was probably only an hour, the main lights flickered back on. The emergency signals ceased. A calm, synthesized voice announced that the atmospheric breach was contained and repairs were underway. The compartment door hissed open. People began to file out silently. Jake pushed himself to his feet, legs stiff. Xyler approached him through the dispersing crowd. "The emergency has concluded," she stated. Her voice was almost back to normal. Almost. Return to habitation unit required for post-incident assessment. More assessment, of course. He fell into step beside her as they joined the flow of beings moving back into the main corridors. The tension of the emergency had dissipated, but a different kind of tension hummed between them now. Thicker, more personal. Back in his unit, the door slid shut, sealing them inside the small, sterile space. Silence descended, broken only by the faint, ever-present hum of the ship. Xyler turned to face him. "Report physiological and psychological status. Standard procedure after an incident." "Functioning," he said curtly, bit shaken up, adrenaline crash starting. That much was true. She tilted her head. "During the structural failure incident, your actions deviated from optimal self-preservation protocols. You hesitated at the doorway." "You were holding the door," he shot back. "You told me to go. I was making sure you followed." "My function includes calculated risk to ensure asset preservation. Your function is survival." "Right, asset preservation." The term grated more than usual. "Look, whatever happened back there, the collision it was an uncontrolled consequence of emergency conditions," she interrupted, her voice flat. "Multiple factors contributed. Structural failure, atmospheric pressure differential, momentum transfer, suboptimal footing." She's explaining it away. Logically. But the memory of the faceplate against his skin felt anything but logical. "Your physiological response during the collision was anomalous," she continued, her blank gaze fixed on him. "Extreme elevation in heart rate and respiration, pupil dilation, skin conductivity fluctuations exceeding predicted stress responses." She was monitoring my vitals. Even then, of course she was, always assessing. "Yeah, well," he said, feeling defensive. "Having an alien warrior land on top of me in a collapsing corridor tends to spike the readings." He tried for sarcasm, but it fell flat, even to his own ears. She didn't respond immediately, just stood there silent, observing him. The small space felt charged, suffocating. He felt trapped again, not by debris but by her scrutiny, by the unspoken thing that had happened between them. "The contact," she said finally, her voice very low, almost hesitant. "The faceplate against your epidermis. It registered unexpected thermal and biosignature feedback." Unexpected feedback. What does that even mean? He didn't ask. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. He met her blank stare, refusing to look away this time. The fear was still there, the uncertainty, the feeling of being utterly out of his depth. But mingled with it now was something else. A dangerous curiosity, a reluctant acceptance of the impossible connection forged in crisis. "Are you okay?" he asked, the question feeling inadequate, absurd. Another pause, longer this time. He could almost hear the processors whirring behind that blank facade, trying to compute the illogical input. "Define okay," she replied, the standard Cathar deflection. But this time it sounded different. Less like a demand for clarification, more like a genuine question, as if she didn't have the data to answer it herself. He didn't have an answer either. Nothing about this situation was okay. Lost in time, prisoner of a logical collective, guarded by an alien whose touch sent jolts through him, whose blank face hid. What? He had no idea. All he knew was that the sterile safety of detachment was gone. He'd seen a crack in the Cathar armor, felt something shift in the guardian assigned to him. And despite the danger, despite the sheer impossibility of it, he wasn't sure he wanted to go back to the way things were before. He took a small step closer, narrowing the distance between them. A test, a challenge, he wasn't sure. Zyler didn't step back. She remained perfectly still, a tall, imposing silhouette against the dim light. But he sensed a change, a tension in her stillness. "My assessment parameters," she said, her voice regaining some of its flatness but lacking its previous conviction, "may require adjustment." He offered a small, humorless smile. "Yeah, mine too." The air crackled. The hum of the ship seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the charged silence between them. The integration wasn't just about him fitting into the collective anymore. It was about navigating the treacherous, uncharted territory between human and Cathar, between prisoner and guardian, between logic and the illogical, undeniable pull that now existed between them. Survival had just become a lot more complicated, and maybe, just maybe, a little less bleak.